Greetings, I'm Dave Throgmorton, the Director of the Carbon County Higher Education Center, and welcome to the fourth and last of our primary season political forums offered by the Carbon County Higher Education Center. Just want to remind everybody that the primary election is on August 18th. You can still get an absentee ballot, but you can also vote at the Jeffrey Center on the day of August 18th. And I encourage everybody to get out and vote. Election years are always important. It's particularly important this year because, well, it's just as important as it is every 2 years, and it's the right thing to do. We're pleased tonight to be doing a political forum for Wyoming State House District 47. We have 4 candidates. One of them is not here tonight, and I have a statement that she has sent in that we can read. Representative Jerry Paxton is the current representative of Wyoming State House District number 47. Joey Correnti IV is here as a candidate for House District 47, and Julie McAllister is also here. I'll be reading a statement from Dee Garrison, the last candidate. The way this is going to work tonight is every candidate will be given 3 minutes to make an introductory statement, who they are, what they stand for, that sort of thing. Following the introductions, the forum is going to be open to questions from the public. They'll be coming in through Jennifer, through Facebook, and then we have some questions that have already been submitted to us, and then we came up with a few backup questions just in case. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question, and then when every candidate is done, we will give every candidate a 1 minute opportunity for a rebuttal or a second opinion for the questions. Make fairly good sense?
Yes.
Pick a number between 1 and 10.
7.
4.
3.
7. We will start with you, Representative Paxton. You will be the first, and the way this is going to operate, we'll start with him, and then we'll rotate it all the way through so that when we do the question, he won't be the first to answer every question. Just the first question. That's kind of what it comes down to. So we will start off. We will have 3 minutes to do a personal statement. The timer is Karen Webster over here. At some point, she'll hold up a sign saying you have 30 seconds. 30 seconds after that, actually about 33 seconds after that, she'll hold up a sign saying time's up, just so you know how it shakes down. But you'll be given 3 minutes now to introduce yourselves. And Jerry, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I'm a 5th generation Wyomingite. I was raised up in the Bighorn Basin area of Wyoming. Went to school at Manderson-Hyattville High School, graduated from there, and went into the military, was a military policeman in the Army. And then when I got out of the Army, I started college at the University of Wyoming, majoring in agriculture education. Graduated there in 1971 and took a job in encampment as an ag teacher 49 years ago today. And went looking for a job and found a home. While I was in encampment, I taught at school for 27 years before I became a school principal, retired in 2005, and then ran for county commissioner and was elected to that position, served for 6 years in that position before moving over into the state legislature. I have 2 daughters, both are teachers, one in Arizona, one in encampment as a kindergarten teacher. 4 grandkids. I currently serve on the Select Water Committee. I am vice chairman of the Education Committee, and I am co-chairman of the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resources Fund. Also have been a town councilman in encampment and mayor of encampment, and I've been on the town council in Riverside and mayor of Riverside. So I've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other in the elected positions.
Thank you. Joey?
Hi, my name is Joey Correnti IV, and I'm running for the representative position for House District 47. I want to take a second to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule tonight. I know time with our family is precious, and right now during the current situation, taking time away from work might be a little difficult as well. I plan to represent you in House District 47 by doing a few things, and the main thing is representing and defending liberty and making sure that your contributions as a taxpayer are properly cared for by the state when our spending decisions are being made. Another thing I want to do is make sure that we're remaining transparent and accountable to you, the people, because it seems that Cheyenne has forgotten that the state of Wyoming is the people, not the government that tells the people what they're going to do. I was born in California back in the late 70s and raised there through the Reagan era, and the first adult decision I made in my life was to join the Army and get out of California and never go back. I spent 20 years in the Army, most of that overseas, quite a few years in the Middle East and other not so wonderful locations. So I've learned how to operate effectively in austere and uncomfortable environments with very little resources, which I think makes me very applicable to the situations that Wyoming are facing today. Retired from the Army in 2017. I had moved over to Wyoming in the National Guard back in 2012 so I could be close to my family who lives out in a hobby ranch in the Red Desert. When I retired, I moved out to Saratoga. Saratoga in the Platte Valley is a wonderful place to live. We have a great tourist destination. I recommend you all come and visit. But the reason I moved there was it was a real nice town that had a lumber mill, and trees don't grow in the Red Desert. So in order for my family to have firewood, living near a lumber mill helped. I'm also a classically trained traditional barber, and I do philanthropic entertaining and hosting. I'm a DJ, and I do a lot of fundraisers and the motorcycle runs, and make sure that the community wellness is supported by having the abilities that I have offered to them free or as cheaply as possible. I think it's important, especially in this district, District 47, that you have a stronger voice bringing the thoughts and feelings of rural Wyoming to the legislature. I think we need to do that with a liberty-minded sense of conservatism and the realization that the major markets in Wyoming all exist in rural Wyoming. Your tourism, your energy extraction, and your agriculture. If Wyoming doesn't listen to rural Wyoming, and Wyoming doesn't understand that rural Wyoming has already learned to make it a lot better with less, then Wyoming's gonna fail, and rural Wyoming is gonna be the first ones to get hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith?
Hello, my name is Jillian Callister. I am also a candidate for House District 47. You're right, it's really awkward live stream, folks. There's 4 people in the room and we have to look at the camera. So apologize for all of us for our eyes wander. It is odd to not look everyone in the room in the face. Also on the Republican primary, sorry for the distraction. Knocked that down, well done. Didn't like it anyway. I was not born in Wyoming, my parents didn't get that lucky. When they graduated from the University of Wyoming, they couldn't find work here. I was born in Indiana and raised in Wisconsin. As soon as I was 19, I came home. I'd spent every summer and most of my breaks from school in Wyoming and Riverton and Dubois with family. I had to be back, so I was. Did a bachelor's in political science, master's of public administration at the University of Wyoming. My education and my plans stopped in 2012 when my husband broke his neck at work. In 2014, I began candidacy for House District 47 for very simple reasons. Started dealing with things after they were broken, tired of dealing with fallout, tired of getting phone calls from friends that I had talked into moving to Wyoming with enormous problems. And almost every single one of these problems could be tracked back to a bad decision, a lack of foresight, a lack of looking for every possible solution for a problem before moving. Something that had happened on a state level. So, skin in the game, a lot of us say that, money where your mouth is, give it a try. The reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm trying, is none of these problems are easy. We're in trouble. On Monday, I believe it was announced we're 1.5 billion short. That's billion with a B. That's a big number. We need people who are committed to solving these problems, to making sure in 40 years Wyoming's here. So when my grandkids are my age, they can hunt like I get to. I was lucky enough to take my first bear on public land this year. I got to do that because I live in Wyoming. This is the most important place in the world to me. I just want to keep it here. And we are in trouble if we don't make smart decisions, diplomatic, productive decisions that have effective change. We're short on money. We don't have a diverse enough economy, but we've got the most wonderful state in the world, and we've got the most determined, hardworking, problem-solving voters anywhere in the United States. I've never seen anywhere like it, it's why I'm here. It's why I'm asking for your vote. So you guys in the room and everyone who does this, we do appreciate your time, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll read the statement from D. Garrison. I wish to apologize for not being present today. My family had scheduled a reunion last year in New Jersey, where most of my family resides. I support a solid foundation for our children's education, as they are our future. The better educated they are, the better prepared they will be for the future and the day they will be leading our state and our nation forward. During my campaigning, I have learned so much from so many people throughout District 47. Education is under a budget crunch with the governor's request for all state agencies to cut their budgets. You have superintendents that must make critical decisions. I can only hope that all staff are consulted before a final decision is made by the administrators. I'm a union person, and I have served state workers since with the Wyoming Association of Correctional Employees, WAC Local 626, to this date with the Wyoming Public Employees Association serving state employees since 2001. I have learned our legislative process as an advocate to include composing several bills, seeking sponsors for them, and speaking before committees, public speaking, as well as working with many different people to provide a better living for state employees. Teachers face many challenges, especially at this time with COVID-19, the lockdown, mineral prices on the decline, job losses with potentially serious budget cuts. You need to be assured that your legislators, parents, and community are behind you. You need to be a part in determining where and how funds will be cut. You are the best to make such determination. My fear is that the fine arts programs are going to suffer the most. We cannot and should not neglect this area of our children's education. They are our future artists, musicians, farmers, ranchers. They must be exposed to these fine arts for a well-rounded education. Many parents are choosing alternative education for their children. We must make sure that those being educated at home or in charter school are guaranteed the same high standards and quality of education as our public schools. There should be the same standard of certification of training for staff as their counterpart in the public schools. Mandatory attendance should be held to the same standards as well. Parents should be encouraged to participate with their children's education. I will speak with you, the experienced educators, and learn from you. I will seek your advice in matters that concern you. I will fight for you, as doing so is fighting for the future of our children. A vote for me will be a vote for action that will benefit us all. Thank you for your time. Respectfully, D. Garrison. Okay, on to the questions. You've got the number 7, so we'll start with you, and then we'll start with you next, Joey, and then down the road. As a representative from Albany, Carbon, and Sweetwater counties, how do you propose to expand Wyoming's economic base and reduce the state's economic dependence on a single industry? As a follow-up, what other types of industries do you envision fitting well into our Wyoming culture and contributing to economic sustainability?
Okay. You know, we've tried a lot of incentives over the years to try to diversify our economy. With some success, we do have some firearms companies that have moved in here and some other folks that have moved in, but for the most part, we haven't done a very good job. And when we start investigating the reason for that, we talk to industry, and we have to spend time with the folks that do the hiring. And if we're gonna find out why we are unable to diversify, we find that probably the biggest obstacle we have is a lack of a trained workforce. And so in this past year, we've passed several bills that I think really will help. And of course, the community colleges are playing a key role in the whole process of developing a trained workforce. We've partnered with the University of Wyoming and our community colleges around the state to come up with several programs that are just in the early stages of being implemented right now. So it's difficult to tell how successful they're going to be, but we have high hopes that they will be. And we've made it a lot easier for high school kids to be able to be concentrators in the career and technical education and still maintain their Hathaway scholarship status. That was one of the first steps that we took, encouraging folks to do that. And we have Wyoming Works, which is another program that incentivizes non-traditional students to enter community colleges on a career path. several other things with the limited time we have. I can't go into more detail than that, but we've done some really magnificent things this last year, especially on the education committee that I serve on, to really, I think, diversify the economy by there's a stop sign.
Thank you. Joey?
We have a situation that we've been able to take advantage of here in Wyoming over the last few years, and it was mentioned that some of them folks came on up here in the firearms industry. The truth is, some of us folks went down there and got them. There are people in this state that do not work for the government that look at legislation that other states are passing and find out what businesses are getting it the hardest from those states, and we do go on our own down and talk to these businesses. Businesses like Surefire and businesses like Magpul, who came up to Cheyenne, Maverick Ammunition. We got Webley Arms. They didn't just happen to trickle into Wyoming because they liked the view. People of Wyoming have worked hard to bring companies here, and you need people that are going to go out and look for the opportunities in the failure of other state legislatures to recognize capitalism and liberty as the basis for a strong business model. Having a strong workforce and having the ability to provide workers, definitely important, but if the companies aren't coming here, what are we going to do with a strong workforce? Trades are definitely important. There are things in Wyoming that people are always going to need. I think we need to stop focusing and pushing this idea of a mandatory advanced degree and whoever whatnot, and get back to the trades. Get back to making sure the people in our communities can take care of the people in our communities. I live in an area where we have one electrician. We have almost no plumbers in Carbon County whatsoever. I think that's ridiculous. They're good jobs, it's honest work, and we should be pushing the trades. The last thing I guess I'd want to say about diversification is we wouldn't have to be worried so much about diversifying if we'd stand up for our own state industries and get that coal out through Washington. And we can only do that with an elected attorney general that'll actually fight for Wyoming and be accountable to the people.
Thank you. Julie?
Could you repeat the question?
I will.
Thanks.
As a representative from Carbon, Albany, and Sweetwater counties, how do you propose to expand Wyoming's economic base and reduce the state's economic dependence on a single industry? And as a follow-up, what other types of industries do you envision fitting well into our Wyoming culture and contributing to economic sustainability?
Appreciate that, just to make sure I have my notes correct. There's a number of areas in oil and gas I personally know of from some research that I did when I worked for the university that there are job opportunities in. There is reasonable investment that could be made for good sustainable work, for viable upgrading of our natural resources prior to leaving the state. I think it's a fundamental problem we have across the state of Wyoming, not necessarily just being focused on extraction, focused on extraction of raw material. All that material, almost all of it is upgraded prior to use, after it leaves the state of Wyoming. Not sure why that is. It seems to be a loss of money to me. I think we could probably learn a lot by talking to some of the people involved in those industries, especially people involved in research in those industries, and seeing what possible upgrading options are available for the state to invest in. What do the people who work in those industries think of that? That's an area that needs to be covered and dealt with. I do agree with Joey on the trades being a very important industry and the community colleges being invaluable to that. It's part of the reason this election is incredibly important and Wyoming is in so much trouble. I also agree with Ms. Garrison that education's gonna get slashed. If we've learned anything about what happens in a state's budget, as soon as there's a shortfall of money, education gets hit. It happens every single time. How it gets hit and the effect of that's gonna be incredibly important to our future job base. We do need a strong workforce, and we also need the communities and the businesses involved in it, but those decisions need to be made on a small level. I also think there's areas of tourism that could be increased with a little bit of support from legislature on a state level for local ideas. And Carbon County is some of the most beautiful places on the face of the earth, and it's incredibly diverse. You can go from the most desert, pronghorn beautiful area to the most mountainous stream, all in one county. I'm sure there's opportunity there as well. I'm sure voters have ideas that are functional, and there when a stop sign, I will obey and stop.
Thank you. Joey, what is your view regarding public lands? Should they stay in federal hands? Do you advocate they be transferred to the state?
Well, especially right now, after the governor spoke just a couple hours ago about his idea of continuing to pursue the Occidental land deal, I think it's more important than ever that Wyoming fight to have possession of the federal lands in the state of Wyoming. Why would we spend something that's equivalent to the current deficit that we're facing on land that we're hoping to be able to extract and actually have be profitable for us in the future, when that land, 48% of the state of Wyoming, is owned by the federal government, and as one of the western states that have not received that land, I feel is owed to us. Again, this is gonna go back to, there's arguments that we can't afford to manage it. If we can't afford to manage the federal lands once they come back to Wyoming, what is the governor doing spending $250,000 a month on a research crew to see if we can get another equal sized parcel that we won't be able to afford to manage either? What it really comes down to is my answer to most things. As a legislator, we're gonna be looking at law and what the state is going to do legally. And in order to have any of that be enforceable or effective within the state of Wyoming or outside of the state of Wyoming, we have got to change the Constitution to have an elected attorney general. Otherwise, we have an appointed official who's up there to be the governor and the capital's lawyer, and they're not accountable to the people, and they cannot be compelled to go out and defend Wyoming or go out and do work for the people of Wyoming, such as open up these coal routes, make sure the water that's coming into Wyoming can be used by and dealt with within Wyoming. We don't have the ability to do that because we have nobody who's gonna stand up and fight for us in that position. I'm ready to go to Cheyenne and stand up for you in this position to make that happen.
Thank you. Julie,
Repeat the question again, please.
what is your view regarding public lands? Should they stay in federal hands, or do you advocate that they be transferred to the state?
I don't advocate they should be transferred to the state for one very simple reason. I'm open to anyone watching this live stream, anyone who has information to follow up after this, one very, very simple reason. I have yet to see a single financial study that shows Wyoming would not lose a ton of money trying to manage those lands. I've yet to see a single financial study or a single study showing that we could afford to do it. So I don't really see, in times when we're $1.5 billion short already, why we'd be looking at land we can't afford to manage. It stays in the federal government hands. It can be utilized as a natural resource that is renewable for timber. It's the reason the Forest Service exists. The Forest Service makes those lands available to us. Trees regrow, they use it again, it works pretty well. If it could be proven that we could afford it, I would be more than happy to discuss those possibilities. But past the simple functional reason that no one seems to show that we can afford it, I don't think it makes any sense. I think it needs to stay where it is to ensure it stays here, to ensure we keep what we have. Make sure it's accessible to everyone like it should be.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well, of course, the Occidental purchase is from a private holder into private land, so that's not a part of our discussion here, but we really can't afford to take over the management of public lands, federal lands. We're tempted sometimes by the paperwork, myriad of paperwork that we have to do in order to do anything at all on the federal lands, to think that we could be more efficient in that, and I'm quite certain that we probably could, but we just don't have the resources. When you think about how many people work for the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service here in the state of Wyoming, we do not have the financial resources to take over those management areas from the federal government. So, and we want to make sure that we continue to have access to all that federal land by our sportsmen and multiple use land, by our grazers and other folks. So I would be opposed to the acquisition of federal land by the state of Wyoming, but certainly in favor of any opportunities that we might have to acquire some privately owned property within the state.
Thank you. Would anybody like a minute to add something else or rebut?
If I could. A comment was just made that the Occidental land deal is not the discussion we're having right now, and I think that's one of the problems we're facing in the legislature and in government altogether. We're not looking at the whole picture. We say, oh, I was asked a question about this, we're only gonna talk about this. These are two equal issues that the state is facing both of right now. So to say, we're gonna have tunnel vision, only look at one thing, and we're not gonna compare it to other things the state is facing, and apparently the leadership in the state is favoring right now, I think is completely ridiculous. We cannot afford to avoid looking at everything Wyoming's dealing with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take that minute direct if I may.
You may.
Just my own comment on the land deal for the accidental land. It's not a private deal when you're dealing with taxpayer money. End of conversation. It shouldn't be 5 people in the state making this decision. You're talking about millions and millions of your taxpayers' dollars. It's not a private deal. It's all of you guys' deal. It's all of your money. You should know what's going on. Yeah, it's really difficult to figure out how to do that on a thing when they're wanting to sell it and not tell everyone what those 13 bids are. Wyoming's only one of 13, but they're bidding with your money. That's not private. I'm done.
Well, and actually, the next question that had come in from the outside was the governor seems determined to purchase property, including mineral rights, from Occidental Petroleum. Do you think this is an appropriate role for the state? Why or why not? So I think that we can chew on this a little bit more. This is your question, Julie.
Do I believe this is that last part of that question to make sure I answer properly?
Do you think that this is an appropriate role for the state? Why or why not?
Absolutely not. Absolutely, it's a terrible idea because it is 5 elected officials. Okay, great, 5 elected officials are not capable of making the decision for the entire state of Wyoming. That is not how we are supposed to work. That is not even how Wyoming works. I know of nothing successful in Wyoming that works that way. We all need our input on what should be done with that and why it's even a good idea. Is there some great financial studies showing possibly that Wyoming could get all that money back on mineral deals in a few years? Maybe, do we know? No. I don't think it makes any sense to make that kind of deal on 5 people's opinions. It's silly. What's available to the average voter is news clips. When we get lucky, we find out a little bit here, a little bit there, and that's it. It's not appropriate whatsoever. It should not have been dealt with this way. I do not know which way it should have been dealt with, but I certainly know this is inappropriate. That's all I have to say on it.
Thank you. Jerry, and the question is, the governor seems determined to purchase property, including mineral rights from Occidental Petroleum. Do you think this is an appropriate role for the state? Why or why not?
I do think it's an appropriate role for the state, and mainly because there's an enormous amount of mineral wealth within that area that's up for sale by Occidental. And it provides a lot of opportunities, I believe, for Wyoming workers to go to work in the mineral extraction industry. We've been hit really hard, as you well know, in all facets of that mineral extraction, from trona to coal and everything in between. And from what I've been able to discern from looking at that area, it has an enormous amount of mineral wealth. And I see it as an investment for the state that could pay back dividends within a very short period of time. I think we could pay for the property and then and actually start to really reap the benefits of that for tax purposes. But most of all, I think it's important to keep Wyoming people working, and I think that's one opportunity that could really open up some opportunities for Wyoming workers in that area.
Thank you. Joe?
I absolutely think it's inappropriate right now for Wyoming to be considering this, whether it be the people of Wyoming. I think we can have a conversation about it, but when it comes to leadership and the people that are going to be putting our money into that pot, I don't think it's appropriate at all, because of what I just said. And I'm going to go back to something my opponent just said. You know, he just said there's great opportunities in mineral extraction and there's jobs, and we can do this. His first answer to the question was we needed to diversify our economy away from the extraction industry, and the second answer to the second question was that we can't afford to manage the federal acres. So how could we afford to manage this 1 million acres? There's 1 million surface acres with 4 million of mineral rights to it. 7 minutes ago, that was impossible. Now it's the best idea in the world. I can't square with that. What we need to do is get the Attorney General to make sure that our federal lands come back into our hands. When we prove that at only the cost of the process, we can make those lands work for Wyoming, then we can look at spending taxpayer dollars on land deals. Until then, I'd rather make sure that we have fully funded school programs. where the spending is done appropriately, and that we make sure the roads that we would need to move all these minerals in and out of the state stay maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody with the final minute on this? Okay. Jerry, starting with you, would you support expansion of Medicaid in Wyoming? Why or why not?
You know, that's a very difficult situation, a very difficult question to answer. We've bandied this about for years and years, and there's pros and cons to that. The federal government, on the federal side of things, it's so unsettled that we don't quite know what's gonna happen next with the healthcare situation, and so it makes us very reluctant to jump into that thing. At the same time, you know, during the session when we were considering that particular bill, I got a number of comments from both from the Platte Valley and from here in Rollins Memorial Hospital, and the folks that are in charge of putting the critical care hospital in Saratoga, that were encouraging me to vote for that particular bill on the basis that it would be very beneficial for the development of that new facility in Saratoga, and for to sustain the facility that we have here in town. The problem is we need to have a really Wyoming answer to that, and Senator Scott, who's been involved in that process in the health division for a long time, is one of the people who crafted that particular document that we were looking at, that bill that we were looking at. And if we could make it a unique Wyoming thing as was crafted in that, it certainly would be worth taking a look at. But you know, it's I'm not going to say that I would vote for or against it until I look at a bill. I think it's unfair to ask, you know, to bring that up until you see how a bill was crafted, because it's such a precarious thing to consider. It has to be crafted very narrowly in order to be able to vote for the bill.
Okay, thank you. Joey, would you support expansion of Medicaid in Wyoming? Why or why not?
I wouldn't support Medicaid expansion in Wyoming at all for a couple of reasons. One, I've heard it talked about in the legislature as a revenue source. We're going to get $280 million or something like that. And that's the federal government footing 90% of the bill for the program expansion. The problem is Wyoming automatically takes on the debit of the extra 10%. The other problem is every bill that's ever been crafted to expand Medicaid only expands the doorway to Medicaid. It only lets more people into that system. It doesn't give you more hospitals. It doesn't give you more doctors. It doesn't give you better service. What it does is say more people can use this system, and we're going to throw money at that system so more people don't have to pay for their own health insurance. And most of these people are able-bodied adults. So if they could come up with a program where it would guarantee never cost Wyoming anything, we didn't have to pay 10% off the bat, and able-bodied adults would be required to go out and work, and the people that really needed the care could get it. It was actually a boost to the system. I could maybe consider it, but probably not as a federal program. We'd have to figure out something in the state. Now, you just heard my opponent say that he doesn't know if he'd vote for it or not, but he did vote for Medicaid expansion this year on House Bill 75, and that may have been the way the bill was written at the time. But back in 2014, he also voted for it in House Bill 84. So I know that regardless of how the bill is written, I am not going to vote for Medicaid expansion, especially when it has the attachment from the federal government requiring us to stay involved and not guaranteeing that they'll always pay their share. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
No, I have not seen a bill I would vote for Medicaid expansion in Wyoming presented at legislature in this year through 2017. Past that, I may not have read it. I haven't seen a single one that makes sense to Wyoming. I haven't seen a single one that makes perfect sense to all of our healthcare systems, but I have also heard from a number of people involved in healthcare that they think this is a good idea because bills aren't covered. Broken those problems down, gone to finance, talked to people in healthcare finance and above them, really started discussing how Medicare expansion would really affect, clinics in the towns and House District 47 clinics in the towns I would go to, where my family goes. And it would help those clinics, but so would a Wyoming state plan. So would expansion of telehealth in Wyoming, so would some support from the legislature on certain billing items, so would restructure of administrative systems. There's a lot of other things that would help them, and nothing's being done whatsoever, as a lot of these small facilities are dying. And we're 1.5 billion short. So I don't see anything that's made a lot of sense, but I also don't see anyone showing anything to the table that makes any sense. So if we're that against Medicaid expansion, fine. But we need to find something that works. We need to talk to the healthcare providers, we need to talk to the finance people at these healthcare administrations and find out what they need. And we need to have some financial transparency on where all this money's going. There's gotta be a way to solve this, but I have yet to see a bill that supports expansion of Medicaid that makes sense in Wyoming, no. But we do need to do something, and we need to do it really soon. I don't know what it is, and I'll actually admit that, but I'm happy to hear anyone's idea.
Thank you. 1 minute, Jerry?
You know, I think it's important not to ignore our constituents on any bill that we get. Sometimes we have to put aside some of our personal feelings on some bills to meet the needs of the people that we represent. And that's exactly what I did when I voted in favor of that. And the fact that it did have some built-in safeguards that were put in there by Senator Scott that made it a unique Wyoming program encouraged me to do that. But it's important to listen to our constituents, and that's what I did.
Anybody else, 1 minute? Lloyd?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not running so that I can tell my district what they're going to do. I'm definitely going to listen to them. But it wasn't the voting on the failed Medicaid expansion in 2014 or 2018 that brought the construction of a new rural healthcare center to Saratoga. It was a grant from the USDA. There are other ways of going about this and addressing the needs and realizing that there's 3 branches when it comes to health. Everyone says healthcare. There's really health insurance, actual medical services, and then the access to those services. So if we can get rural Wyoming back in a position where the whole state does not have to suffer so that we can have the services we deserve, that's the kind of creative thinking we need. Not this blanket plan with special Wyoming things in it that the federal government isn't going to recognize because this is a federal program. The state cannot dictate to the federal government what they can do. It's going to take the community mindedness of the rural people to come up with answers to their own problems like they did in Saratoga.
Minute, you good, Julie?
I'm good.
Okay. This question just came in from on the outside. It's aimed at you, Joey. You're up next. How do you feel the governor has handled the COVID-19 situation?
I feel the governor has made a critical error in a few places. Again, I'm liberty-minded. I don't know that he's not authorized to do certain things. I do know that our state statute allows the health officer, director, whatever the title is, to do certain things. It doesn't necessarily mean those statutes are correct or constitutional. I think the biggest problem is that we were in a position where Wyoming faced an issue that has had less health impact on the people of Wyoming than I-80 does on a regular basis. But we've shut down all of our industries. I lost a business that was going to be open. The day I got my state license to have the business is the day the governor shut down the industry that I was working in. He says we never shut down industries, we put down restrictions. I'm sorry, you can only restrict small business so much before you shut them down. I do know that Title 35, 4115 says that the governor can definitely declare a state of emergency, but it also says he has the authority to say when that state of emergency ends. I understand COVID is a scary thing for a lot of people, and I recognize that the fear is real. The posture that we've taken against it as a state under the leadership of Governor Gordon, I don't completely agree with. It's fostered more fear and it's caused more damage than, like I said, the highway that we do most of our business on, we used to do most of our business on.
Thank you. Julie? How do you feel the governor has handled the COVID-19 situation?
He could have done worse, could have done better. I would have liked to have seen him put a little more work into testing early on so that we could have gotten things handled in a more appropriate way. It's awful hard to figure out what you're dealing with when you don't know who has it. My husband's disabled. I deal with a lot of doctors' offices. I talk to a lot of doctors, and I spoke to 2 epidemiologists. Yes, it's scary. It is not good. It's not going away. We need tests, we need PPE, we need to figure out how to function. It's not gonna go away. We're gonna have to figure out how to do this. I would have liked to have seen a little more access to testing, I would have liked to see a little more access to PPE, and I'd like to see more of those things going forward. Other than that, I don't really have too much criticism. It's a hard job to balance, and it's a pretty hard job to figure out when you don't have the budget transparency and accessibility that we need, and that's something that hasn't been addressed, and highlights the COVID problem. The fallout's going to be horrendous, and that's not the governor's fault. That's not any single person's fault. The fallout of it as a actual world pandemic is gonna be horrendous. How that handled is much more important going forward.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well, I'd say initially I was really supportive of the governor's positions and the way he handled things at the very beginning of the pandemic. But as time goes on, I think most of us have lost some patience with that, and I would certainly like to see the state opened up a little bit more and the restrictions eased off a bit. I think we need a little bit more transparency in the information that we're getting. I think it's important to note not just the number of cases, but the severity of those cases. And so I'd like to see on a regular basis something that would let us know exactly how many people were hospitalized at any one time, but also how many people were in an ICU unit and how many people were on a ventilator, because I think all those are important factors. We hear so many things about people that are asymptomatic almost with the disease. And so just the number of cases doesn't seem to be enough information for me to make the kinds of restrictions that have been imposed on us. So I'd like to see a little more transparency in what we've done, and certainly would like to see the restrictions, a lot of the restrictions eased a little faster than what we have. I think carrying this through till the end of this month is the restrictions that we're operating under now is a little excessive.
Anybody want a minute? Julie,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on removing the food tax exemption, an additional sales tax, and a corporate income tax? Are there any other alternatives to look at during this time of depleted budgets and as energy income continues to decline?
Sales tax, corporate tax,
And the food tax
income
exemption?
tax.
Food tax exemption, additional sales tax, corporate income tax, or any other alternatives?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure to hit on each tax you just suggested in the question. Sales tax on food is an absolutely miserable idea. We need to keep our hands out of people's food budgets. Doesn't belong there. Needs to stay exempt as long as humanly possible. Terrible idea, stay away from it. Income tax, not a good idea either. Corporate tax, not a reasonable question to ask any of us without something in front of us knowing what you're asking us. Or sales tax as well. But on food, no. Income, no. And unless I were to see something behemothly different after many other avenues had already been explored, I'd probably still say no. It's not gonna help. Taxing people and taking what they have isn't going to help the problems we have. Figuring out how to fix the problems we have is what's gonna help the problems we have. The direction to go isn't figuring out how to get more tax money. Sometimes the direction to go is figuring out how effective is that money being spent. Money needs to be productive, especially tax money, not just busy. It needs to be productive, and those kind of research studies, those kind of accountabilities, that kind of budgetary transparency is not law in Wyoming. People don't wanna know exactly what they're spending every penny on, and it's ridiculous. We're taxpayers. We should know every single penny and where it's going and why. That's where we need to begin. Taxes is the end of that conversation. We're on the wrong end of it.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well, I think the people that are in the know on the finance side of things really have indicated to us that there's no way we can cut our way out of this dilemma that we're in right now. You know, the state government before all this hit is about the same size as it was 10 years ago. And now we've put a 10% cut on top of that. We've got some strange things happening out there, about $250 million worth of cuts coming with an additional number probably proposed. So we're gonna have to look at some kind of a taxation thing. And the most fair tax and the best tax that I've seen come down the pike for a while is the corporate tax. It affects only the big corporations that are traded on the stock exchange, not the small corporations. We're one of only 2 states in the United States that does not have a corporate income tax. South Dakota being the other state that does not have that income tax. So I think that's the low hanging fruit for now. We passed that in the House of Representatives. It failed over on the Senate side. And so I think we're gonna have to revisit that. As far as the food tax is concerned, people think that may be a regressive tax, but when it comes right down to it, the poorest of the poor probably have SNAP cards and other means of making that up. I think we have to look at it. I'm not sure exactly where I would stand on that right now, but depending on what our other sources of income or of revenue might be. We just have to look at everything, I think, in the situation that we're in right now. We passed a lodging tax that it will go into effect on January 1st, 2020, and will certainly help get the tourism industry off of the general fund and free up some money. But we're gonna have to go beyond that, and so we'll have to look at all the proposals. Nothing is off the table.
Joey?
Absolutely opposed to instituting a food tax. It is off the table. And the reason is, not just the poorest of the poor. We're Wyoming. We are family. We are one town with really long streets. We raise our families here. We feed our families here. This year was amazingly difficult to draw tags for a lot of people. How are we gonna feed our food? Look in your basket, think everything in there is gonna cost you 6% more because the current and recently previous legislation couldn't be responsible with your money, so they're asking you for more at a time where they're gonna be slashing programs and services. So what they're really saying is, we're gonna take more from you and we're actually gonna show you how much less we're gonna give you, and we think it's okay because nothing's off the table. I have a hard time believing that my opponent wouldn't vote for it, because just this year alone, he voted for the 6-penny tax to no longer be a special purpose, even though it was specifically voted by the people in those areas to be used for a specific purpose. He voted for that on House Bill 25. He voted to make the 5th penny tax a permanent tax to be used by those local municipalities and counties any way they saw fit without input from the voter. He voted for another raise in the fuel tax, which after in 2014, when he voted the 14-cent raise in, said, it's the last fuel tax we'll ever need in Wyoming. And here we did just get another one. He just mentioned the lodging tax. He also voted against the amendment in the lodging tax that said if you have a Wyoming driver's license, you could be exempt from that tax. It is ridiculous for anyone to sit here and say, that's off the table, I'd have to consider it. We know how this representative has voted in the past. And to get the tourism off the general fund by using that lodging tax, we have that Department of Tourism that we're dumping tens of millions of dollars into a year to advertise private businesses. They won't be off the general fund. You keep feeding them. I'm gonna stop.
Anybody need a minute?
I do.
Okay, Julie had her hand up first. And
Jerry can go first if you like.
Jerry?
Well, the attack from my opponent is, I think, unjustified, but we're not gonna go into that. The average family in Wyoming pays $3,180 in personal taxes every year, and they get $27,050 worth of benefits. So there's a huge gap in between the amount of benefits they're receiving compared to the amount of taxes they pay, and that has to come from someplace. And so we have to do the things that are sometimes a tough thing to do, but we have to do it in order to keep our budget balanced, and so sometimes there just aren't any choices.
Julie?
Yeah, I wanted to make one last comment on the food tax as well. I'll voice the same, it's off the table, and I'm sorry, SNAP and food stamps don't matter, because when you incorporate or reinstate that kind of a tax, it hits food stamps and food pantries even harder than it hits the poorest of the poor. It's awful hard to know if you've never been on food stamps or dealt with it firsthand. That's almost $1,187 on average. That's 3 different mathematical estimates on what food tax would cost the average family of 4 in the state of Wyoming. I don't have that extra. I don't know many families that have that extra in this climate, and to mention that it really wouldn't affect people because they have SNAP, I just did the math really fast. I'm not fantastic at math, but I'm pretty sure it would affect them exactly $53 a month. So it would affect them pretty hard.
Joy?
The amount of benefit each Wyoming resident receives versus the amount of tax they actually pay in the state is not the fault of the taxpayer. It's the fault of the people that mismanage these programs that are overfunded by a legislature just likes to spend money they don't have. The bottom line is the legislature is responsible for passing a budget, but they have no oversight on the actual expenditures. So when a department comes back next year and says, well, we spent all the money, we need more, they never come and tell us what they spent it on. The only thing Wyoming really knows is where our money's being sent. We don't know how our money's being spent. And as far as anything I said being an attack, it was not an attack. It's facts that are available on the Wyoming legislative website, www.wyledge.gov. Just 2020 alone, House Bill 25, House Bill 47, House Bill 63, and I don't have the number for the lodging tax, but I'd also like to mention, last year he voted to give himself a raise. They call it a per diem reimbursement, but that's how your tax dollars are being spent. It's not an attack, they're facts on the government website.
You're up next, Jerry. What are your thoughts on term limits? This came in from off Facebook.
Well, it's hard to find where the happy medium is. It takes a while for people to learn this job, especially the finance part of it. It's very complicated, but it certainly should not be a lifetime appointment. I think that bringing new ideas and new blood in is a good idea. I don't know where the number should be. I know that years ago we did pass, or the former legislature before I got in did pass a term limits bill that was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of the state of Wyoming, and I don't know exactly the details of why that happened, but certainly I would be in favor of looking at term limits. There's gotta be a better, I don't know what the number is, but there's gotta be a better way of doing things than we're doing it right now, so I'm not opposed to term limits.
Thank you. Joy?
I think the concept of term limits is a wonderful idea. I think legislation forcing term limits is unacceptable. There's two reasons for it. One, we should not have a system that forces people in and out of office because, as my opponent said before, we gotta listen to our constituents. And if our constituents say, hey, we want this guy to stay around, maybe they have a good reason for that. It is incumbent on the voter to do their due diligence and know who's running and what they've done during the year. Your civic duty does not begin and end on a 1 hour lunch break at the ballot box. Term limits should be imposed by the people. So if we have people who on a large scale are voting for some guy they like because he waves at them every time he drives past them, or he used to be their 4-H teacher, or they think he's just a swell fella, but he's over in the legislature and they're not paying attention to what he's doing, then really the people deserve who they choose to get. If they're looking for somebody who's gonna fight for them, then they need to look at the person that did it last time and say, is this the person that's still doing it? If not, go out and find a fighter. Go out and find somebody who understands liberty, cares about your voice, and believes that you should vote your conscience as long as it's well informed.
Thank you. Julie?
All these questions almost done. I just realized I should have been waiting for you to finish turning that the whole time. Sorry. I do agree with term limits vehemently. I have absolutely no idea what they should be, but we need them. Government was meant to move. The reason it works is it can hold itself accountable. The reason it's still here and we're still in America is it can be changed. It can move, it can adapt. Does it move fast enough? I don't meet too many people who say yes. So yeah, we need to do something about this. A lot of people have bad taste in their mouth for it, but we do need to do something about it. I have no idea what the right numbers are, and I have no idea what the right bill is. But we need to do something.
Okay, thank you. Anybody need a minute? Well, we're getting off the close to 8 o'clock. At this point, we'll give everybody 2 minutes for a closing statement, starting with you, Joey.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank you for spending some time with the group here tonight and getting a little bit of education on who your candidates for office are. I am completely dedicated as my full-time job, even though I have a couple other businesses. They're all mobile and they're designed to make sure that I can travel this 8,500, whatever size of Massachusetts district and get out to see you and hear you and know you so that I can bring your voice to Cheyenne. I also want you to remember one thing that I know for a fact. We have a truncated legislative calendar in Wyoming every year, which means 30 to 40 days I'm in Cheyenne, a couple other days throughout the year I'm at committee meetings all over the state. The rest of the time it doesn't mean my job's done. My job is to get your voice to the right table in your local area, whether it be the county commission, the town council, or whoever's running the task force or board that's standing in the way of you realizing the full potential of your property rights, your rights as a citizen, your rights as a member of the community. So if you vote for Joey Correnti, Joey will be there. Joey will fight alongside of you, and it's not because I think you're weak, it's because I know you're important.
Julie?
Yeah, look at the timer, lady. This has gotten a bit more tense in here than the past forums, but I think it's good because you guys need a statesman. You don't need someone who's gonna make bigger problems in the process of trying to fix a problem. You don't need someone who's not even taking problems on, because things that don't move don't get better, they get stagnant. Your voice needs to be heard. We need ideas. We need to do something about this. I encourage all of you to vote, and if it's against me, great, at least you're participating. I care about this process. I'm glad to have active conversation and true discussion and argument, but the definition of argument is that it moves forward and you produce something out of it. Sometimes the best thing to do is to agree to disagree and move forward to solve the actual problem. That's what I want to do. I'm asking for that difficult job. I'm asking to make the difficult decisions. Try to keep Wyoming here. We're gonna have to change to get through this. Let's make sure it's the right change and the right decisions are made. Cuts are not just made because there's no one there to speak for them and there's no one there to hear unpopular things. But right, correct decisions are made, your voices are heard, and things are dealt with a statesman way. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well, there's no doubt that we're gonna have to make some very difficult decisions. Speaker of the House said probably this may be the most important legislative session we've had in the history of the state of Wyoming, and I think he may be right. You know, bills aren't made in isolation. It takes a majority of both houses, and it's a difficult process to get a bill passed. It's got to go through 3 readings and so forth, and so any bill that gets passed isn't done by one person. It's got to be a collective, done collectively among both houses of the legislature. So if we have a bill that's successful, it's gone through some very tough scrutiny, and so I think you'll see that happening in the next session that we have also, when we have to make those hard decisions about where the revenue is going to come from and what services we can do without. You know, we hear a lot of people, no new taxes mantra, but they don't come up with any real concrete solutions on where we go from here. We can't, you know, how many more services can you do without? Do you want your snow plowed in the wintertime? What can you live without? Because that's what may be the decisions we have to make. Then on the other hand, what kind of a tax is the most fair tax to help us get past this thing? Any tax that we do pass, in my mind, would have to have a sunset date or a sunset target so that if we get to a certain point back with the legislative stabilization reserve account, the rainy day account, that tax goes away. Because if you give politicians money, they're gonna find a way to spend it. So you've gotta put some limitations on that. So any taxes that I would vote for in the future to help get past this pandemic would certainly have a sunset date or a sunset target to make sure that it goes away when the economic health of the state comes back.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all 3 of you for coming out here, and I want to thank all 3 of you for putting your names in front of the voters, to serve the voters. It takes courage, and it takes people with integrity, and we have 3 of them in the room right here tonight, and I appreciate it very much. Those of you in Facebook land, if you're citizens of Wyoming and you're 18 years and older, go vote. Thank you very much. Thank you all.